This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and I am live with former Olympian and legendary wrestler Ken Patera. How are you doing today, sir?
Very good. It's a pleasure being with you. We've never met, so this is the first for both your podcast and informal introduction by Slick Nick.
Yes, hopefully I'll run into you in person one day, but we're up here in Canada and they still have the lockdown going on here with the borders closed.
Well, if the Democrats down here had their way, they'd shut this place all the way down too. Yeah.
Where are you based out of now? Still Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota. I live on the east side of St. Paul, about 10 minutes from Wisconsin.
Have you avoided the riots that went on there a couple months ago?
I was 15 minutes from there.
Okay.
But on the Interstate 94, runs right through my neighborhood. And that was about 15 minutes. And they just got, I have a friend of mine that's a cop. Well, he's a state trooper. He told me the whole thing. It's all a bunch of BS. Yeah.
I bet you never would have imagined things would get that bad there.
No, not Minnesota. They refer to themselves as Minnesota nice.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah. I says, well, that nice is out the window.
So you were obviously known as a weightlifter before you became a wrestler. How did you get into weightlifting?
Well, I was a shot putter. And to improve my shot putting and discus throwing, I started lifting weights. And I dabbled around with barbells and dumbbells since I was 10 years old. And by the time I was 17, 18, none of the coaches back in those days believed in lifting weights. They says, well, Patera, you keep lifting those weights, it's going to make you muscle bound. You won't be able to throw the shot. You won't be able to play football. You won't be able to do anything. You'll be just a big, stiff guy. And of course, I've been accused of being stiff in the ring, too. But, that's how I got started, just trying to improve myself.
Did you have a trainer teach you how to do all the lifts properly, or did you just kind of throw yourself into the competitions?
Well, this is the funny thing. When I was 18, the gym I was at was Sam LaPrinzi's gym. It was just a small gym, real nice, in Portland, Oregon. It was the only gym in Portland, Oregon. That's 1961. And so there was 7 or 8 professional wrestlers that used to come in there every week, when they were off the road. And they all came over there. Sam had a beautiful gym, spotless. He had all the equipment. He had a steam room, which the wrestlers spent more time in the steam room than on the weightlifting floor. So that gave me more room. But anyway, there was this guy, Herb Freeman, from, I think he was from Brooklyn, New York. And he was wrestling professionally and going to chiropractic school. And he saw me messing around with some barbells one day. And he came over and says, Ken, I used to do the Olympic lifts. As a matter of fact, I placed third in the nation one year. That was back in the 50s. So he taught me how to do the Olympic lifts. At that time, it was clean and press, military press, 2-hand snatch, and 2-hand clean and jerk. And nowadays, they only have the snatch and clean and jerk.
And you were the first person to lift 500 pounds above your head from the United States? Yeah.
As a matter of fact, excuse me, I had this bad habit of chewing Copenhagen, but I like the habit. But yeah, it was 1969. I think it was December 14th. I went up from Portland. That's where I grew up. And I went up there with some friends. And there's a weightlifting meet right out of Seattle, Everett, Washington. And that's where Boeing aircraft manufacturing is. So it's a beautiful little community. And we were up there, and I was feeling my oats that day. I'd never cleaned 500 pounds before. And in the gym, I've done, 490, 495. I had a couple of attempts at 500, but always missed it. So here we're in a regional weightlifting contest, and I called for 500 pounds. Well, that was a world record. The world record at that time was 486 by Bob Raschke. I think he's from New Haven, Connecticut. So anyway, boom, I clean it like there's no weight on the bar. 500, weighed 503 and a half. I stood up, jerked the weight overhead. The problem is I didn't get credit for it. There was a little technicality. You had to have 3 international certified judges, judging the contest. Only 2 showed up. I was so mad. Anyway, they submitted it, but we got turned down. And that was the first time 500 pounds had been lifted and put overhead by anybody.
Wow. At what point in time did Vergne Gagne start sponsoring you?
That came in 1971. My oldest brother, Jack Patera, he wound up being the first head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And but in 71, he was defensive line coach for the Minnesota Vikings. And of course, Vergne Gagne, his old AWA was based out of Minnesota. So I went back to visit my brother, and I was coming from, was that in 1970? It's either 70 or 71. They had the World Weightlifting Championships in Columbus, Ohio that year. So on my way back to Portland, I stopped in Minnesota to visit my brother and his family. He says, "What do you want to do after the Olympics?" Because he knew I wanted to go to the Olympics. That was been a dream of mine since I was 10 years old. And I told him I'd like to be a professional wrestler. And he says, "Well, why is that?" And I said, "Well, the gym I go to, Sam LaPrince." He said, "Oh, yeah, I remember going to Sam's." I said, "Well, there's 7 or 8 wrestlers in there all the time. They're in there every week." And one of them, Herb Freeman, was an Olympic lifter from New York. And they encouraged me to become a wrestler, when I was through with my amateur career, because I was still throwing the shot put for the 68 Olympics. And then in 72, I was 99.9% weightlifting. But I dabbled around with the shot put too, and I wound up 4th in the world. So I said, well, hell, I'll go to the Olympics in the shot put and weightlifting. Nobody had ever doubled that before. I missed the Olympics in shot putting by a 1/4 inch. A guy from California by the name of Dave Maggart, he wound up being the head athletic director out there after his career was done. 1/4 inch. I was so pissed off. He'd never beat me in his life. Then I find out I had never taken any steroids at that time. I did later on. But he went from like 62 feet to almost 65 feet. And that's right where I was, consistent at. He was consistent at around 62 feet, 3 feet less. Well, he pulled one out of his butt that day, beat me by a 1/4 inch. And the reason he went to the Olympics instead of me, they take the top three places in each event. Doesn't matter if it's a 100-yard sprint or high jump or pole vault or weightlifting, or no, weightlifting takes one, but in track and field they take the top three in each event. And so I'm sitting on the sidelines again. I said, hell with this. And I just concentrated on weightlifting from 68 to 72. And but getting close to the Olympics again, that old bug got back in my system. I says, well, maybe I get back in the shot put and the weightlifting. Well, yeah, I pulled some serratus muscles on my side, and that blew that. So I just, like I say, I just concentrated on the weightlifting after that.
How was your experience over in Germany for the Olympics?
Oh, wow. That Germany's a beautiful place. Everybody smokes cigarettes and drinks beer, but the place is spotless other than that. And everybody knows Germany. The people in Germany are, I call them warriors, because that Germanic race has something in their system that they have to conquer. And so they're always, up until the Second World War, they were always in some kind of battle, with their neighbors or, with us. We kicked their ass, though. And after that, they learned their lesson. But I love Germany. Yeah, but when I went over there, my knee was the size of a football. I had so many stupid little nagging injuries. I couldn't believe it. I said, what the hell's going on here? So I get to, we went over 14 days before I was supposed to compete. My knee from an old injury 2 years prior blew up like a football. Well, our American doctors were too busy attending to the basketball players. And I couldn't believe I go into the athletic rehab area, and there's a basketball player on every bench, every table, had everything tied up. That went on for 3 days. I said, hell with this. I went over to the West German athletic facility. They said, oh, yeah, Ken, yeah. They love weightlifting. They like big, strong people. We'll take care of you. They had me go see their head doctor, their head therapist. And he worked on my knee, worked on my back, and I felt like 90% after a week of that. And so I'm warming up for my competition at the Olympic weightlifting hall. And I was myself and Vasily Alexiev from Russia, big fat Russian. Everybody remembers Alexiev. So we were all in the same warm-up area, and I strained that knee again, and oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And anyway, I wound up winning a bronze medal in the military press. And then the snatch came along, and my knee was so swollen that I couldn't hit a low position. And I only started with 374. I'd done 402 in practice. So it was well within my means. Some people say, when you started with the snatch, you started too heavy. I said, no, I didn't start too heavy. I started too late. And when I snatched the weight, you like to have enough weight to push you down. Well, 374 wasn't enough weight to push me down. And so I was hitting like a middle position, lots of weight behind me all 3 times, out of the competition. I says, wow, shot put, weightlifting, I'm not made for either one. So out I go. And I'd been working with Vergne Gagne at the time, and he was sponsoring me, $100 a week. Of course, if the Olympic Committee had found out that I was getting 100 a week from somebody, they would have kicked me out of the Olympics. That amateur sports back in those days, that's how it was. So everybody, all the top competitors were getting money. You know, you can't do Olympic sport at a world caliber level without being sponsored, because you have to train all the time. And they said, well, how many days a week did you train with weights? I said, 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday, I did stretching because flexibility for Olympic lifting is one of the foremost things you have to do. You have to be flexible and limber, believe it or not. A lot of people think that they see these big bulky guys on TV, you know, lifting these huge weights. Those guys are like gymnasts, believe it or not. And because you have to be flexible. You have to be a real athlete in order to do the Olympic lifts.
At what point in time did you meet Ric Flair? Because I think you were still a weightlifter the first time you met him, from what I understand.
Yeah, Vergne Gagne said, Ken, if I'm going to sponsor you, I'd like you to move back here to Minnesota and train here, so we can, you know, keep tabs on you, see how your progress is going and stuff. So I moved from Portland, Oregon back to Minnesota because my brother, you know, he defensive line coach for the Vikings. And so everything worked out. So Vergne's giving me $100 a week. And he had a doctor there that took care of all my aches and pains and everything, you know, with cortisone shots. Well, especially my knee. A few years later, about 5-6 years later, here comes the doctor report, especially on football players. Football players were getting cortisone injections in their knees and in their back and their shoulders, elbows, everything. Well, the problem with cortisone, it dissolves your tendons and it leaves pocks on your bone structure. And nobody knew that. Well, you know, when I'm all done lifting weights, I start wrestling. And after about 15 years of wrestling, I started having all kinds of injuries, you know, for really no reason. I popped the tendons off both elbows, you know, tricep tendons, and had to have them surgically repaired. Then I wound up having 6 operations on my left knee and 2 on my right knee. And then I dislocated my left shoulder, which I have a complete shoulder replacement now. I've had it done twice because the bones just, you know, were disintegrating. And from that damn cortisone. And so if anybody's listening that needs a cortisone injection, take it easy. You know, 1 or 2 is all right, because all cortisone does is get rid of the inflammation in the joint and the soft tissue around it. It doesn't heal anything. It destroys, if anything. So just a little bit of advice. You ever have a cortisone?
I had a couple in my shoulder for tendonitis at one point in time. But that's good to know for sure. So as far as being Ric Flair's roommate, what was that experience like?
Well, I was back there after I moved back there because Vern wanted me to. I was talking to my brother. I said, you know, here, I'm a young guy, you know, 25 years old at the time. I said, Vern, or Jack, I said, are there any bars around here that, you know, with nightlife and whatnot? And he says, you know, he wasn't going to any bars. You know, he was married and had 5 kids. And he says, I think over on Excelsior Boulevard, you'll find a bunch of bars over there. nightclubs, and I hear that's the hottest area in the Twin Cities to hang out at night. So I just drove over there on a whim, and I'm looking at these bars, and I see one called George's in the Park. I said, that looks interesting. It's a big place, a big nightclub with live music and whatnot. And I go in there, and I asked the guy at the door, the doorman, I said, you guys have a cigarette machine? He says, yeah, it's right over there. So I go over there, take my 50 cents out, 50 cents a pack back in those days. And I put it in the cigarette machine, pull the lever, here comes my pack of cigarettes out. Then I stood up, and the guy standing there by the cigarette machine, he says, I hate to bother you, but are you Ken Patera? I said, yeah. He said, I saw you on the Wild World of Sports 2 weeks ago. I said, yeah. And he says, oh my God. He said, what are you doing in here? I said, well, we all have to be somewhere. And here we are. Well, to make a long story short, after a while, Rick and I became real close friends. And we started thinking about getting a place to live together with a couple other guys, a couple bartenders. And so one thing led to another. We rented a house in South Minneapolis, right off of 35E, the freeway that runs from Duluth all the way down to Brownsville, Texas, I think. It's the longest freeway in North America at that time. I know there might be something longer now. But so we rent this house, the four of us. Well, Rick was always a party guy. When Rick got into wrestling, I told Rick, I said, wrestling was made for you, Rick. And we were living together, and he kept bugging me about meeting Vergne Gagne. I said, as soon as I get back from the Olympic Games, Rick, next year, I'll take you down to meet Vergne Gagne and see if we can get you in the training camp. So anyway, prior to that, I talked to Vern about Rick. And I told him, I said, Ric Flair, he knows your son, Greg, and Jumpin' Jimmy Brunzell. Brunzell was playing football for the University of Minnesota. And he says, oh, yeah, well, I'll ask my son, Greg, about Rick. So Greg says, yeah, he'd be great to come to wrestling camp. Well, Vern says, well, there's only one problem. We already have 5 guys. We have Greg Gagne, Jimmy Brunzell, Ken Patera, a guy that played pro football for the Dolphins, and Broncos. And his name was Bob Bruggers. And we have another guy from Iran, kind of a skinny guy. His name's Khosrow Vaziri. But he was in the '68 Olympics down in Mexico City. And so that's the 5 guys, you know. I don't know if we have room for a 6th. Anyway, after about 2 weeks of asking Vern practically on a daily basis, will you please just, you know, I'll bring him down to the office here and you talk to him, interview him, and see what he's up to. And he said, okay. Well, Rick was 2-time amateur state champion over in Wisconsin, but he grew up in Minnesota. He got kicked out of public school in Minnesota, so his parents were fairly wealthy. His father was a doctor, so they sent him to a boarding school over in Beaver Falls, I think it was, Wisconsin. So I think he even got kicked out of there, but he did get a degree, high school degree. He was a wild man his whole life. He just has that boundless energy, you know, always wants fun. And he was the type of guy that needed attention on daily basis. And the more, the merrier. And so we were training together. And then, of course, Vern started the wrestling camp when I got back from Munich. That was, I got back the end of September. And so we started that wrestling camp the 1st of October. So we went October, November through the first couple of weeks in December. And our first matches were December 17th. And I wrestled another Canadian, my first match, Vergne Gagne. You remember Vergne?
Yes, he was an agent too in WWE, I think.
Yeah, he always walked around with that riding crop. You know, that people that ride horses, they'll have that whip. They call that a crop. And he walked around there. He'd always smacking people all the time. He was a wild man too. But that's how Rick and I got started.
I've heard Sergeant Slaughter tell a story that he showed up when Rick and you were doing the camp, and he claimed that he stretched Billy Robinson and stretched Rick and basically humiliated everyone in amateur wrestling. Is that just Sergeant Slaughter telling stories?
No. Now, I don't remember him wrestling Rick, but the day him and Billy Robinson got into it, I wasn't there. But that's what I heard. And then Bob backed. I asked Bob, and he says, yeah. And I said, well, good for you, that fucking Billy Robinson, that asshole. Because the Iron Sheik, I mean, he was an Olympic wrestler, legit. I mean, this guy was a tough bastard. The problem was he only weighed 180 pounds. He wrestled in the 181-pound class. And he was just, you know, he was like 6 feet tall, but he's skinny. But real wiry. He got really strong, though, because he was a Greco-Roman guy. That's all upper body strength, you know. And so Billy Robinson, we're all taking turns getting down in the, you know, you get down on your knees and you put your arms out, and then one guy gets on top of you. That's how amateur wrestling starts the match. And then the guy underneath tries to escape. So we all go through there. So the Iron Sheik is the last one. So he's there. So Billy tells him just to lay flat. And because he wants to turn him over. Well, Billy couldn't turn him over. Here's a guy, 180 pounds. Then Billy got pissed off, frustrated, and then dropped a knee right into the Sheik's hip when he's down on the floor and relaxed. Oh, just, God, man, put a big knot. And we're all sitting there. I mean, we were shocked. I said, what the hell is that? I said, Billy, what'd you do that for? He just, you know, he's a smart ass, you know. Anyway, so the Sheik gets up damn near in tears. I mean, that hurt, you know, having somebody do that to you. And anyway, Baron von Raschke, he was a legitimate NC2A champion from Nebraska. And, you know, heavyweight division. I think he weighed 270 in college. He's a big, raw boned farmer type, you know. And so I told Baron that what Robinson had done to the Sheik. He says he's a cheap shot artist. He said, no way Billy Robinson can beat anybody that knows anything about amateur wrestling. And of course, Robinson he was what they call a hooker. If you give him your arm or leg or something like that, then, you know, he can break it. You know, he knows all the leverage points and everything. So he taught us all that wrestling stuff, you know, hooking, they call it, and showed us all how to break fingers, break arms, break legs, you know. And so we all had very well-rounded professional wrestling coaching from Billy Robinson. Then Vergne Gagne used to come out and work with us. Don Morocco used to come out, and a few other wrestlers, And so it was a hell of a camp. Then they'd run us up and down this old riverbed that was all dried out and full of rocks and everything, 10 below zero, out on his farm. Oh, Jesus Christ, I beat the shit out of us, And I weighed 310 pounds, and he's running me like a goddamn marathon runner, somebody that weighed 140 pounds. And so and Rick too. Rick was like 280, and then Jimmy Brunzell was 200. Greg Gagne was 170. Cosgrove was 180. Bob Bruggers, the football player, he was always in shape. He was from Western Minnesota too. He was All-American and everything. So we had a hell of a camp.
Tony Smith is wondering if you have any memories from working for Sam Mushnik in St. Louis. I know you were the Missouri State champion at one point.
Yeah, I was the only one to hold the Missouri State championship and the Intercontinental Championship from the WWF at the same time. And Sam Mushnik, I love Sam. He was a politician. I mean, he was a diplomat, he was like Vince McMahon's father. And they give you a handshake, no contracts, none of that bullshit, What they told you was, they back it up with their word. And everything was perfect. And Sam gave me all kinds of opportunities, paid me top dollar. Because he loved the fact that I had been in the Olympics, and I was a good performer. I put warm seats in or warm butts in the seats. We had a lot of sellouts down there at Kiel Auditorium. And another guy that actually prevented me from dropping out of wrestling was a guy by the name of Paul Bosch. He ran Houston, Texas. And I went to Paul back, I think it's my second year in the business. I said, Paul, I just came down here from Minnesota, Vergne Gagne. He said I'd be doing pretty good down here, but the territory's down, attendance is down. And, I'm just not making enough money. I said, I could go back to Minnesota and drive a beer truck and make the same money. And he started laughing. He said, Ken, don't do anything that you might regret later. He says, I'm going to take care of you down here. And Fritz Von Erich up in Dallas, he's going to take care of you. Joe Blanchard, Telly Blanchard's dad, he's going to take care of you over in San Antonio. Don't worry about a thing. Within 2 or 3 weeks, instead of making $650 a week, I was making $1,300 a week, double. And that's just because I spoke up. If I hadn't spoke up and stood my ground, I'd still be at that $650. Well, it costs you $300 a week to make it, hotels and gas and everything. Gas was only 40 cents a gallon back in those days. Hotel rooms were only, 15. Sometimes if you're scrounging around, you get a hotel room down there in Texas for $10. But then, I like to drink beer. I like to eat. And so it's about $300 a week road expense. Hell, that when I finished up in the WWF, average daily expense on the road was like $250 to $300 a day. So, 16 years later. So
the next 4 questions are actually from Billy Graham, who I'm friends with. I told him I was interviewing you, and he had these questions for you. He said he remembered driving you to the hospital for your tricep injury, and he would like to know if you ever got that fixed.
Oh yeah, yeah. Here, I don't know if you can see it. See that scar? Let's see. It runs from here all the way down through the elbow and into the ulna. That's the bigger bone in the forearm. What happened? We were doing a TV shoot there in Madison, and I had flown in, so I didn't have a car. Billy had driven over to Madison, I think from Minnesota. So, and there's nobody around. The ambulance, there's always an ambulance at the TV shows because you do 3 matches every night for TV. So anyway, I'm in the ring with this kid. I pick him up to give him a push slam, shot put, which I've done 1,000 times. Anyway, something happened. I pushed him out, and my arm came down and hit me in the top of the head. And it just stayed there. And my elbow, I saw my elbow was as big as a softball. And I said, oh my God, what the hell did I do now? So Billy drove me to the hospital, and the doctor examined me over there. It was like midnight. And he says, I think you have ruptured your tricep tendon. And so anyway, I called the doctor the next morning, and this Dr. O'Phelan in Minneapolis. He's an orthopedic surgeon for the Vikings and the Minnesota Twins at the time. And I'd known him. As a matter of fact, he was the doctor for the Olympic team over in Munich in '72. So he looks at me. He says, Ken, I got bad news for you. You might not be able to straighten your arm out anymore. And he says, I'll do the operation. He says, this will be my last operation. He says, I told you on the phone, I said that I quit surgery almost a year ago, but I'll do this for you. I mean, I was begging. He was the top surgeon in the country. So he, fixed it. What they had to do, the tendon had popped off back here, off the tricep muscles, and it came all the way up here, the tendon. So they had to open me up and pull that tendon back down to here. They drilled a hole in the ulna and inserted that tendon through that hole and then stapled it. Talk about an operation. There's 350 internal stitches and about 100 staples on the outside to close up the surgical wound. And I walked around. I had a leather brace on for, 4 or 5 months, because he told me, he says, Ken, if you accidentally pop that tendon off again, he said, you're going to walk around the rest of your life with a chicken wing. That's where your elbow's at a right angle to your body. I said, well, I don't want that. Today, I have more flexibility in that right elbow than I do in my left elbow after all that. So I made the right decision.
He also wanted to know your memories of doing the weightlifting competitions with the fake plates.
Yeah.
He was having back issues at the time. He couldn't lift the real plate.
Yeah. Yeah. What we did, he said, we need some fake plates, Ken. I said, what do you mean fake plates? He says, well, I'm all screwed up. He says, I can't, to make this thing realistically, we're going to have to put the equivalent of 450 pounds on the bar, at least 450. I said, well, yeah, I can do it, So anyway, a friend of mine there in Minneapolis was a tool and die maker. So I called him and I told him what our situation was, that we needed some aluminum plates or wood plates. He said, well, aluminum just to make the casting would be, $2,000-3,000. I said, how about the wood? He said, I have a woodworker friend of mine that can put a piece of wood on the lathe and make it look just like a regular plate, steel plate. He said, how many do you need? I need 4, 2 for each side. Then we'll use 4 real plates. So we started this thing off in Minneapolis. I'd get the weight up here, and then Billy, he'd throw chalk in my face and punch me. I'd fall over, and just before I hit the mat, the bar is here. Now I'm going down, I take the weight and I push it up over my head. So when I landed on my back, the weight would land on the mat instead of on my face. And so one day, it was the 3rd or 4th time we did this. We're in Chicago at the old amphitheater in Chicago. And there were some weightlifters in the front row. And they came exclusively to watch me and Billy do this weightlifting. Well, when the guys that were loading the plates onto the Olympic bar, they'd put a real plate on, then they put a wood plate on, then they put another real plate on. Well, when that real steel plate hit the wood plate, they go thud, So the guys at ringside, there's 5 or 6 of them. They have a bunch of smart alecks. So then we go up to 4 plates, and we put that steel plate on again, hit that wood, go thud, instead of steel on steel, steel on wood. They all jumped up from their seats and they're yelling, "Those are wooden plates. That's all fake bullshit." I looked at them. I said, "Sit down, you fucking assholes." I don't think Billy said anything. And so then we did the same thing, got over like $1 million. We had 15,000 people in the building that night. And, we came back, I think in a lumberjack match or something, sold the place out again. So it was a hell of an angle.
The other thing he wanted me to ask you about was, I guess he was training with you for the tire throw for the world's strongest man. He wanted to know if you remembered that. Yeah. I won the tire throw in the world's strongest men contest. I did the first one, then Billy did, it was 2 or 3 after that, where he did his. It was upstate New York at the Playboy Club. Hugh Hefner was trying to get that thing opened up for gambling and stuff, but that never went through. So the TV network had it up there. Me and my girlfriend at the time, we went up. And of course, we knew a lot of guys on the TV crew. And my buddy Bruce Wilhelm, that won the world's strongest men contest the first 2 years, he was up there doing some announcing for him. And so Bruce got us a room that the TV people had rented. So we're up there, having a good old time, party time, USA. Didn't cost us a dime. And Billy, I think Billy won a couple of events. I don't remember which ones. But when I did it, I talk about bad backs. I had screwed my back up working with Bobby Backlund in Boston Garden. And I took a bump over the top rope and landed on the ring apron and threw my back out. God, it was 2 weeks before I competed in the world's strongest men contest. And so they had 10 events. I was only able to do 5 of them. I was competitive in 5. The other 5, I just went through the motions and wound up placing 3rd. The Bruce Wilhelm won it, a football player from the St. Louis Cardinals, Bob Young. He was a big weightlifter. You probably remember
Bob or maybe his brother. Well, Bob's passed away now. I don't know how old his brother would be, but he was a hell of a power lifter. And yeah, we had pretty good times. I remember all that shit.
The other thing he wanted me to bring up is you already brought this up. You said you took a bit of steroids, but he said you never really took that much and you still had like natural strength.
Yeah.
Is that right? You were just kind of born with pretty good genetics?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I was never a believer in injectable steroids or pills. I just couldn't force myself to get on a regimen, on a daily routine of steroids. So, I'd take steroids like twice a week, and then I'd forget to take them for the next week or two. And I says, and Bruce Wilhelm, the guy I mentioned earlier, he'd call me all the time. As a matter of fact, I still talk to him 2-3 times a month. He lives out in California, and he'll call me or I'll call him. He says, Ken, when I was taking the steroids for the Olympics, and he said, you remember to take your steroids? It was called Dianabol. It was a little blue pill, but it was really strong, but it was toxic too if you stayed on them for too long or if you took too much. And shit, I'm a young guy, I didn't want to, screw myself up. So, even sometimes deliberately, I'd go off them for, a month or two at a time. And I went on cycles. I had 3 cycles every year for 6 weeks. I'd take steroids for 6 weeks, and I wouldn't take anything until 6 weeks before the next contest. Let's say I would take them for 6 weeks before the national championships. And that not the first 2 championships, the last 2 championships. I was in 4 altogether. I would do 6 weeks, have the meet. Then I wouldn't take anything until the next contest, might be the World Weightlifting Championships. And then I'd take 6 weeks again. And then let's say in the spring, I'd have a regional meet and I'd do 6-week cycle again. Everybody else in that weightlifting team just stayed on the steroids 24/7. And it didn't matter if they were 148-pound class or 198-pound class. And, they knew my regimen. And they said, Patera, God, you could be lifting so much more if you just, do what we do. I mean, we had 148-pound guys military pressing, 360, 370. I mean, that's back in those days, that was ridiculous. I mean, they do it now. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
A lot of the fans wanted me to ask you if you could tell us your version of events that happened with that McDonald's incident, because there's so much folklore out there for the years about what happened.
You do 1,000 good things and you fuck up one time, and that's all they want to talk about. Not like you. You're interested in my entire career. But a lot of people, all they want to know, what happened at McDonald's? What happened at McDonald's? Well, nothing happened at McDonald's. I went to McDonald's and they were closed. It was like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I walked from the Holiday Inn, Mr. Saito, and I we were sharing a room up there. It was up on the hill. So the McDonald's was down at the bottom of the hill. And we were in Waukesha, Wisconsin. It's a big suburb just outside of Milwaukee. So he had hurt his knee. He was wrestling Mad Dog Vachon that night. Mad Dog bummed his knee up. So he couldn't walk down there. I mean, he was in serious pain. So I walked up to the drive-up window because there's lights on there. I looked inside. There was a TV crew in there. They had cameras all set up, and they had 2 or 3 platters with hamburgers stacked like a hamburger mountain. And so I said, could I get 4 of those hamburgers to go? He says, no, they're not warm anymore. They're cold, and we need them for the commercial that we're shooting tonight. I said, come on, you probably got 300-400 hamburgers there, I said, me and my buddy were at the Holiday Inn. Their restaurant's closed. We're starving. So they wouldn't serve it, or wouldn't serve me. So I said, oh, fuck you. I was so pissed off. I'm starving. So anyway, I start to walk off, and some kid, I find out later that they had fired the week before for being a jerk. He comes running up there, grabs a boulder. There's boulders all over the outside of the window in like a rock garden. So he picks up this one boulder. It was about this big. He throws it right through the side window of the cashier. And I turn around, I'm looking, the cashier's ducking, and this kid, he's out there, fuck them, that son of a bitch has fired me. I said, is that why you threw the rock? He said, yeah, screw him. So he takes off. Well, I didn't think nothing of it. I just walked off. Went back up the Holiday Inn, and when I got back up to the room, I told Saida what had happened down there. And he understood English, but at that time he couldn't really put English into meaningful sentences. He could, but he always kind of felt inadequate with his English. So anyway, I'm telling him about this McDonald's situation. About a half an hour later, we get a big knock on the door. It was the police department, Waukesha, Wisconsin Police Department. And there was this girl, blonde-haired girl, about 5'11", and her partner. They got the guns and the billy sticks and handcuffs and leather jackets on, and they came up there, looking for a fight. They knew who we were because the prick down there at McDonald's said, "You're Ken Patera, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, we're staying up here at the Holiday Inn. We wrestled over in Watertown earlier tonight." So he said, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't help you out." So as I start to walk away, here comes a kid, throws a rock through the window. I said, "Oh, fuck." So I get it. So the cops start quizzing me. "Well, sir, we got a report that you were down at McDonald's earlier this evening, and you threw a boulder through the window." So I told the cops what had actually happened. I told them the truth. And they didn't believe me. I said, "Well, whether you believe me or not, that's what happened." And so they said, "Well, do you mind if we come in and look around?" I said, "Well, I don't know what you're going to find." So I said, "Yeah." Just at that time, the male officer kind of stepped to the side. By that time, Saida was at the door. He's in his underwear and a T-shirt. And then he realizes there's a female officer there, and he's embarrassed. So he doesn't want to go out in the hallway. So anyway, the male officer kind of moves to his right. She pulls out the mace. Well, she had the mace in her hand. I didn't see it. So I'm standing, I didn't have my glasses on at the time. And so the male officer ducks, and the female officer hit me right in the face with a bunch of mace. I'd never been maced before. Christ, I couldn't see. My eyes were burning. And then I don't know what happened. Anyway, Saida winds up in the hallway, stretched them both in like 5 seconds. Next thing we know, there's 14 more state troopers, city cops, highway patrol, the whole gang came running down the hallway. And we got in a big Donnybrook out there. Saito and I, we stacked them up like kindling wood. And I mean, they all had nightsticks. They were whacking us in the head and everything. And the rest is history. So we let them take us to jail at that time. And the funny thing about it, the cops were all wrestling fans. And the cop that Saito leg dived and wrenched his knee, his name was John Dillinger. You remember the old gangster, John Dillinger? So anyway, John, he loved us wrestlers. Unfortunately, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And his father, when we were in court, his father, first thing he does is come over, gets my autograph, and goes get Saito's autograph in the courtroom. And so we had an asshole judge and an asshole district attorney. And that old saying, Murphy's Law, if anything's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. The judge's last name was Murphy. And they sentenced us 2 years in prison and 4 years, 2 years in prison, 4 years stayed, and 4 years probation. They gave us 10 years, in other words. We got out after a year and a half for good behavior. But, bullshit like that, a year and a half. Nowadays, they'd slap your hand or wouldn't even do that. And, no bond. You just walk out of there. But, those were different days.
Yeah, nightmare situation for you. You can answer these next couple questions fast. Any memories of Billy Jack Haynes?
Yeah, well, when Billy Jack Haynes and I became a tag team combo, I didn't realize, but Billy was kind of messed up on drugs, and I didn't realize. I really sincerely didn't realize how bad it was, and because he never let on to me, and so because tag team partners, we'd share a room. We're on the road every night for like 15, 20 days at a time. We'd check in, throw our bags in the room and stuff. I'd wake up 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Billy's gone. He was gone every night. He was never there. And I always asked Billy, I said, where do you go at night? Oh, I just go around. I got girlfriends here, girlfriends there. Well, he was buying drugs. And another guy I used to share a room with quite a bit was JYD, Junkyard Dog. Every time we'd rent a room, he'd want to borrow my car because for some reason, I'm the one that always got elected to rent a car. So we check in the hotel and, same thing, 1, 2 in the morning, Junkyard Dog, hey, Kenny, can I borrow the car for a little bit? I said, yeah, go ahead. Well, Jimmy Brunzell tells me about 3 months after all this is going down, because we shared a room for 2, 3 months on the room, JYD and I. He says, Junkyard Dog doesn't have a driver's license. That's why he never rents a car. He doesn't have a driver's license? No. I said, fuck, if he has an accident or something with that rent-a-car, it's my ass that's on the line. So I went to JYD. I said, hey, Junkyard, I said, you can't use the car anymore. He said, why? I said, you don't have a driver's license. Who told you? I said, it's irrelevant. I just can't risk it anymore. So, but he was going down the hood, buying crack cocaine and whatever else. And sometimes he'd be on that crack for 2, 3 days straight. No sleep, nothing. I don't know how in the hell those guys do it. Yeah, Roddy Piper and a lot of those guys were like that, though.
Well, it caught up with a lot of them, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Buddy Rose was another one. Yeah.
Tony wants to know, how tough was Harley Race?
Handsome Harley Race. Are there kids listening to this?
It's probably mostly adults 30 plus, I would say.
Okay, well, let's get with Harley Race. Harley could outdrink everybody. He could outfight everybody. He could fuck more girls than anybody. He could fuck girls longer than anybody else. And that was Harley. He could drive faster than anybody else. And trust me, he could drink and he could fight and he could drive fast. His first wife was with him one night. They were down in Kansas or Missouri. He's going 120 miles an hour down the freeway. Boom, have an accident. She goes through the windshield, dies. And, you know, it was unfortunate, but I don't think he got a scratch on him. And, you know, that old adage, you know, one person pays the dues and the other skates. So, but yeah, Harley was a tough bastard. Yeah.
Steven wants to know the strongest opponent you ever faced.
You know, that's hard to tell because, you know, we, in wrestling, you know, it's so much of it is set up. I mean, it's just out of respect for one another, because we have to wrestle every night. We can't go in there and pound the shit out of one another, or, you know, bend each other's arms or legs or whatever. So, you know, that was a tough one. But when you tie up with somebody, you know if they have strength. And, oh, you know, Bruno was somewhat of a crowbar. You can ask Billy. Billy tied up, you know, snug and stuff. The guys I like to work with were, if they were snug, then I was good with it. Wahoo McDaniel, he was snug. You know, he was no powerhouse, but he had body strength. You know, he's a hell of a football player. And All-American at Oklahoma. And he, when he broke into the NFL, he got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 1960. That was the first year that the Cowboys were actually a franchise. Well, my brother Jack was middle linebacker for St. Louis, and he was traded to Dallas in what they called expansion draft. And he was like one of 8 you know, veterans from other teams. So he's middle linebacker, and Wahoo was an outside linebacker. And Wahoo came in 3-time All-American from Oklahoma, and a big boom, boom, boom. Anyway, Wahoo made it to the 3rd cut, and then Dallas cut him. Well, right away, the New York Jets picked Wahoo up. Well, that was the best thing that ever happened to Wahoo, because Wahoo went back and started playing football in Shea Stadium with the Jets, and he became a hero. He was as big as Joe Namath. Yeah. And
finally, the last question for today. I think we'll have to do a part 2.
We got to wrap this up, Hannibal. Okay, right. This is taking way too much time. You know, you're taking advantage of the good man Ken Patera right now. No, we can't have this.
I get a little long-winded.
No, you don't, Ken. Hannibal, we got to go, okay?
All right, thanks, Ken. We'll get to the other questions another time. Have a great
No, we'll do it again. We'll do it again.
Yeah, if you're lucky, Hannibal.
You want me to body slam him now?
Put him in the full Nelson.
Yeah.